Welcome to the 12 Days of Celtic Mythology, Season 4, Day 1. So let's get started with a story. This story is from Loch in the West Highlands of Scotland. It was Beltane Eve, and although it should have been lovely and warm, it was absolutely Baltic. Near Loch Treig, there lived an eagle. She was old and grey with age, but no matter how she curried into her nest and fluffed up her feathers, she just couldn't get warm. I've never known a Beltane this cold before, she thought, and I've known a rare wheen of Beltanes in my time. She began to think then about how old she was and about how much life she'd seen. She began to wonder whether any animal alive was as old as she was. The eagle of Loch Treig decided to go visiting and try to find out where she stood with regard to her age. And she had a plan to find out if any of the other animals were older, without seeming to be bragging. At first light, before the other birds had tasted the water, off she flew. And every animal she met, she would greet them and ask them whether they remembered a May Eve as cold as the one they just had. And they all said, "No, never." "Ah," she thought, "perhaps I am the eldest." So she got talking to a wren. And although the wren said he'd never known a cold night like that at Beltane, there was a blacksmith bird at Bunree who was older than old, and it would be just like him to remember the weather of long ago. Well, the eagle thanked the wren and flew off to the smithy at Bunree. But when she got there, the place was a deserted ruin. The forge fires hadn't burned for a long time. It was all cold. And there on the anvil sat an old, blind blacksmith bird who had worn a great hole in the anvil where he was always sharpening his beak. "Oh, the luck of Beltane to you," said the eagle. "Wasn't it terrible cold last night? Have you ever known a Beltane night so cold as it was?" "No," said the blackbird. "But there's an old stag who lives in Inch Forest. He loves to talk about the weather. He was old and grey when I was but a fledgling, but he's getting guy stiff, I suppose. He used to come visit me here sometimes, but I don't think he can make the journey anymore. I know he's alive because I hear his croaky old roaring at dawn sometimes. Now, as far as I know, he's the oldest living creature." Oh, the eagle didn't like the sound of that, but she kept her own counsel, while the blacksmith bird talked on and on. Finally there was a break in the blackbird's song, and the eagle said, "Well, I mustn't keep you any longer," and promised to visit next time she was passing. So off she flew to the forest of Inch. Well, she found the old stag shivering beside a stump. His great crown of antlers were so heavy he had to rest them on his shoulder. And the eagle, she greeted him politely and wished him a good Beltane, inquiring whether he'd ever seen such a cold night at Beltane as the one they had last night. And he said that he had not. Thought the eagle, I must be the oldest. And then she said nothing. But they talked of old times, and they remembered and named all their ancestors, and then till the eagle said, "Well, I must be off." But as she was about to go, the stag said, "There's a place called Currin and Kennan, north of here, with a wee loch at the bottom. Maybe you know it." "Indeed I do," said the eagle, who had flown most everywhere. "When I was a calf, following my mother, we went there to drink once, and I met an old, one-eyed trout. He was a great talker, and no mistake, and very aged even then. So off the eagle flew to see whether she could find this fish. With her keen eyesight, it didn't take long. She landed beside the loch just where she'd seen the trout, and took a sip of water, and saying, 'I toast your health on this Beltane, Mr. Trout. But isn't it cold? I imagine you never saw such a cold night at Beltane as the one we had last night.' 'Well, begging your pardon,' the trout replied, 'I've seen one that was worse, and well I have reason to remember it. I was a young and frisky fish in those days, and I was so cold. I thought the best way to keep warm was to do leaps out of the water, you know. And, well, what happened? I bashed the side of my head off that slab of rock over there, and my eye stuck to the rock with the frost. Came down from my leap without it, leaving me as you see me today. Oh, the eagle was a bit crestfallen. She knew that she'd been bested. But she stayed a while, passing the time with the trout before she went home. And after that, she made the rounds every Beltane, visiting her new friends. But I don't know whether she outlived the trout. Somehow, I doubt it. I got that story from the Scottish folklorist Ronald Black. Now, there are a few versions of it, but I'd never heard one as good as this. Most of them are quite short and pointless. That's the way folklore is, because folk move around and they like to tell stories. But let's just go over this story a wee bit, so we can have a little natural history lesson along the way. So it starts with the eagle, which, as I'm sure you know, is really an enormous bird of prey. And Scotland also has sea eagles, which are even bigger. But they used to be very rare, so I'm sure our eagle is probably a golden eagle. And the eagle visits a wren. Now, wrens are tiny, teeny wee birds with surprisingly loud voices, just a wee ball of fluff, really, that swallowed a whistle. The wren sends her to what's called a blacksmith bird in the story. We can probably assume that it's a blackbird, based on it being a blackbird in some similar stories. And if you're not from Europe, you might not know this bird, which is known for its very beautiful singing. And the blackbird sends the eagle to visit a stag. And finally, the stag sends her to visit a trout, who turns out to be the eldest. So here's today's question. 5 animals: an eagle, a wren, a blackbird, a stag, and a trout. Can you think of another Celtic story that mentions one of these animals? Some of them come up quite a bit, others might not. Tell me what you know in your answer. Now, for instance, there's an eagle somewhere in the Mabinogi, and quite a bit of folklore about wrens. So tell me where the animal you picked appears in whatever story it is, and tell me the story. Tell me, oh, I know it from this, or I know it from that. Or you can tell me what the folklore says about the animal. And by folklore, I mean either a folk tale, like the one I just told, or just something like, maybe you know, like the thing about magpies, that you're supposed to greet them politely and ask after their health or their families. If you see one, something like that would do. So I need an example or a reference. Now, if you don't know of anything, if you're new to all this, Wikipedia is your friend, or DuckDuckGo, or Google, or books you might have. But woe betide anybody who uses an AI tool for their answer. If I suspect that, your answer won't count, so just maybe don't risk it, eh? So try searching for stags in Celtic mythology, or wrens in Irish folklore, or something like that, and tell me what you found, or maybe you just know something. Now, as I said earlier, I got this story from Ronald Black, and he used to write a column about Highland folklore for the West Highland Free Press, a great free, not free, but independent Scottish newspaper, that kind of free. So Ronald Black wrote this column for years, and all his articles have been put on a website called the Querndust Calendar. A quern is that thing you grind grain with. And you can find the story I told today, and quite a bit of information relating to the story in 2 articles on that website. And I'll put links in the show notes if you'd like Scottish folklore. This is a fabulous resource. I used to read Black's columns sometimes back in the day, but it was only recently that Marissa Hegarty, the author, told me that they were all on this website now. So thanks, Marissa, if you're watching. Another great resource for Gaelic folklore is these 2 books by John Gregorson Campbell, Superstitions of the Highlands and Islands, and Witchcraft and Second Sight in the Highlands and Islands. Both of those books are free to read on archive.org, and I'll link them. Ronald Black, who I was just talking about, re-edited these books recently, a few years ago, and published them along with a good introduction and some great notes in one volume called The Gallic Otherworld. It's a little bit of a pricey book, but it's very, very useful if you're interested in that sort of thing. But like I say, the original books by John Gregorson Campbell are free to read online. Now there's another famous folklorist from the same period called John Francis Campbell, just to confuse things. He's mainly was a collector of folk tales, that is, the stories, often longer stories, which were published in 4 volumes called The Popular Tales of the West Highlands. And these are also on archive and on another website called Sacred Texts, and you can read them for free also. So it's easy to get these two John Campbells confused, I know. And it maybe doesn't matter until it comes to that moment when you're trying to find something in a book. So since I'm mentioning books on Scottish folklore today, and I probably won't do that again in this series, I'll just mention one other author. So I mentioned Marissa Hegarty earlier. That was her who put me onto the Ronald Black website. Just this year, Marissa Hegarty's own books came to my attention. I didn't know about her before. So she's published quite a few now, 6 or 7 books, I think. Based on the 2 that I have, the 2 that are on your screen, I can highly recommend them from the point of view of excellent scholarship. They're big books, they're great thick tomes, all of them, so it seems. So I haven't read them cover to cover. I actually bought Gallic Polytheism for the glossary originally because it's very, very good. But I have read some of the book now. I've mainly read like the evidence, the historical bits. I haven't gone so much into what she writes about modern polytheist practice. That's much more subjective anyway. But certainly, as far as the scholarship, super book. And I've read more of Paying the Rent to Manannán, and that's an area where I think I know quite a bit and have done a lot of research myself, and I was very impressed with her research. So based on that, I imagine the other books are going to be really good too. Well, I blethered on for quite a bit now, so I think we'll stop there for today. Don't forget to answer the challenge questions. So I'll see you tomorrow for another animal story, something quite different. So bye-bye for now. If you'd like to delve a little deeper into the topics in my videos, you might enjoy taking one of my online classes. There's almost always something on offer. Some classes have tiered pay what you can pricing, and there are usually a few scholarships available for the more expensive classes. To get notifications about classes and about scholarships when they're announced, you can go to my website and subscribe to my newsletter or follow me on my Patreon page.